Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of the Big Brother 27 Companion. So this is the second time I've recorded this video because enough happened for me to change my stance on the review that I need to re-record all of it. And of course, Donkey Kong Bonanza came out last night, so I got very distracted with that. Good boy, that game is good. And so I am now doing a very, very delayed recording of this. But that's okay, because this week deserves some conversation, because there was a lot that happened, and what I would say is generally a great week of Big Brother. I've come to the conclusion that week ones are normally pretty good. Even like some of the worst seasons of the new era, BB24, for example, in terms of the week one, was still a pretty iconic week with Paloma's rise and spiral to death, as she burns out because she decides we're all in a simulation. And so like week ones have been pretty consistent. Part of why is there's so many people in the house. There's so many mistakes. There's a lot of room for just mess. And there's a lot of room for a lot of different types of strategy to occur at the same time. Because you've got alliance building, we've also got targeting of a vote. You don't have the full inner workings of like proxy fights as much, but then but in this case you do, but often there's a wide range of what you can see. And so it's a very fun dynamic to watch and enjoy. And it's especially fun because you're learning the new characters, you're learning about them, you learn things about Riley that you will know for long now as you think about who Riley is that you just wouldn't know before. So it's getting to know you, but also there's a strategy. You're getting to see how relationships start to the extent that they gave us the ability to watch early feeds, which they didn't really, but we've had enough feeds at this point that like we have a good sense of how things have started, and we're getting to watch these things slowly evolve. There's some weird shenanigans, Riley. There's a lot of drama in Rachel, and there's a lot of just really exciting stuff. I mean, when I recorded this, I was going to send it in this morning, and had it edited. I was like, okay, it's ready. And then the Rachel fight happens. I'm like, well, let's redo the week one review because week one is really everything from when the premiere started to today in the roughly the morning as before the vote, right? And so now we've reached the end of week one, so it's a good time to talk about what my thoughts are on this week and go from there. To start with, I want to talk about the episodes. We have 3 episodes this week: the premiere, the Sunday episode, and the veto. Interestingly enough, all 3 include footage from the time periods we didn't get to see on live feeds, which creates an interesting dynamic, one of which is what is the edit telling us versus what is actually happening. I did a 2-minute clip with 3 things that you might not know if you were not watching live feeds, talking about some of especially specifically focused on the Keanu, Vince, Rachel story of it all and the Jimmy story. There's a couple things I wish I'd said. Jimmy's rehearsing was very funny because Keanu, of course, probably didn't know that Jimmy had been rehearsing the line, but of course he did. He was, and so Keanu's retort of like, "Okay, did you rehearse that?" was very funny and iconic. But in terms of the 3 episodes, you have the premiere where people are moving in. You've got to do a lot to introduce people to who you are. And then you have the opening comps, the opening twist, the opening format, the opening alliance stuff, the first meetups, your roundtable where everyone introduces themselves. There's a lot that occurred in this period on top of the speed gameplay round that was the BB accomplice, where they guessed that Riley would be the accomplice who wasn't, right? So to start with, you have your 3 opening comps. All 3 I think were actually really good. I like the split. I like a lot of the camp story. I loved the Adrian and Zach sort of slingshotting, where Adrian was like, "Well, I'm pretty close to Zach, but he's done a part of the puzzle I haven't, so I'm going to copy him so I can rush to the next part, which is the doors." And then as he's listening to the doors, Zach's like, "Well, I know that Adrian has listened to these doors. He hasn't listened to these 2. I'm going to listen to one of them, and if I think it's kind of right, I'm just going to pick it and go," which gives Zach the 10K and which ends up being also a possible power that you can give up for 10K, which I think is a really good twist because inevitably there's a good chance you have a moment where although Zach's so well positioned, I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen, where Zach has to choose, do I want to risk my life for 10K or do I want to give up the 10K to guarantee my safety? But it's a safety that will basically mean Zach's locked in a jury, if he wants to use it, because he's playing incredibly well. And so you have the premiere, which I thought was a very good premiere. I thought it was the best premiere of the new era. Definitely not the best live move-in, but the best premiere for sure. Because obviously it wasn't live move-in. Then you have episode 2, where you have the BB Accomplice. The BB Accomplice twist was very fun. I thought they did a good job with Amy. I thought it was fun watching the fans because we didn't have anything to really talk about. So us being able to like pour over the first episode and get just enough to figure out it was Amy, I thought was a really cool thing for the fans to sort of do as they were waiting for stuff to do. Now I was busy enjoying New York, and so I was very, in some ways, appreciative for no feeds, because that would have made my life a lot more complicated. But at the same time, no, I really do want feeds. But for a lot of the fans who were waiting on stuff, there was something interesting in the BB Accomplice where they could figure it out. And I liked it as a speed round, a way to get to know, for people to get to know each other, a way for people to interact in a game setting before they've established game relations. So you can say, oh, I felt like we bounce off each other well. It's a way for people who are on the bottom a bit to have sort of something to immediately talk game about. And also for people who are sort of not having the right vibes to get a message of, hey, something's going on here. I thought it was a good way to set up Amy as a character, who's of course been very, which ended up being very important for this week in general. But I do have a couple worries about the BB Accomplice twist, one of which is if Amy wasn't allowed to win HOH, or was she allowed to win HOH? Because if she was, that would make everything really complicated. If she wasn't allowed to win HOH, then her being on the block means that she, or theoretically, she could have been backdoored from Big Brother, having never been allowed to win a comp other than the BB Blockbuster, in which if she loses, she would have been out. I think that's uncomfortable. Obviously, she does get a chance at the veto. She will get a chance at the Blockbuster. But that was a bit something that sketched me out. And then, but overall, I really liked the episode. The nominated BB Accomplice, I thought the shower stuff was fun. It's funny. There's a good sense of humor, I think, on this cast. It is a bit frustrating that something like Ashley's 15-minute shower, which of course was also included, like talking to Vince, gets edited as a 2-hour shower when it was probably 15 minutes. That being said, Ashley definitely does like her being clean. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Although the edit was so shady for waiting until Ashley was in the shower for the veto. Although it's quite possible that she had been prepping. They said, "Hey, everyone, get ready for the veto," and she said, "Well, I'm just going to do a quick shower and then I'll go." And they were like, "Okay, we're gonna just make fun of you for this, right?" But I think the episodes in general were good. I think you have to deduct a bunch of points from episode 3 for the potty humor, trash. The comp was great. I thought the comp was fine. Smelling is how do I say it? There are some accessibility issues with smells specifically, especially for autistic people because of hypersensory issues. They said that there were buckets for throwing up and that people almost threw up. I don't want to be in a comp situation where people might throw up. That being said, there are ways that these house guests could have been a little smarter about the smell, about how breaking up the smells. Because one of the problems with smells, they say, would be like, oh, all the smells blur together. Well, then the way I would have done it, my initial thought was, oh, see what you need to look up, see the smells you need to be looking for, then go to the, or in like maybe even like smell like 4 of the gross smells, then go do the first smell. If it's not one of those first 4, you can probably have a good sense guess of what it is. And then you go do the tire treads, let your nose reset, smell the other 4 smells, smell the second smell, then do the footprints, let those reset. Something along those lines might have helped with the resetting, but it seemed like most of what people got caught on was the smells and trying to figure that out. But either way, the main problem was the amount of potty cam scenes that was not very fun. But overall, and then you have sort of Vince's edit being given a lot more of a mastermind edit than he ever really should, because he is being very dumb. And I wish the edit was emphasizing that more. There's a lot of potential drama that could have occurred between Jimmy versus Keanu that they didn't show. They didn't show Keanu spiraling as much. They made it seem like Keanu was smarter and more clever than he really has been. And I do like the Jimmy villain edit. I mean, I think it's something he actually kind of wants. But it is kind of a weird, like, Jimmy, you've been foiled, when really it's more by Keanu and Vince, when really the answer is Rachel has foiled Jimmy here. Something, of course, in which I talked about Rachel stopping Vince from putting up Keanu. Something Vince was really thinking about doing. And if Rachel had said, no, you should be Keanu, it would have been Keanu. And Rachel probably would have had an easier week this week. But unfortunately for her, that was not the reality. which has created some complications. In terms of life, so I would say for episodes, I would give them an 8. Uh, yeah, I think I would give them an 8. I thought the first two episodes were a 9. The third episode was kind of a 6. So I think that averages out to about an 8 for me. Overall, I would say it was a good week of first episodes, but come on, the potty humor was so pointless. And for a season of a lot of like mystery and like intrigue, the theme to be so camp counselor-y, I guess you had the crime scene, but the vibe was kind of strange, and I feel like there are ways they could have done it that would have been a bit more highbrow and felt less toilet humor, but it is what it is. Moving on to live feeds. Live feeds this week were great. I really liked a lot of different things. I thought Jimmy was really fun. Apparently, we missed a couple fights, which is an ideal, especially because they didn't show him. Supposedly, Jimmy and Kelly have had some fights. Supposedly, Jimmy and Vince got into an argument because Jimmy was asking Vince if they would show their argument. Obviously, but like we did get to see an Ashley Vince fight on the episode that was not on feeds, which is cool. But in terms of the feeds themselves, I thought it was really fun. Seeing Rachel back is obviously exciting. She has sort of a much more mature edge to her, and I say that even though she's gotten into a fight. It's a very different version of Rachel, like in the way that the fight with Say Today broke out. Um, for example, or Deal Last Night broke out, which I'm saying today because I was watching it live, and so my brain is still very fresh. But obviously, it is now Thursday as I'm recording this. But the thing about Rachel that I really like is she has a bit more of her like wanting to get to know you. She's obviously really locked in Amy, who isn't the kind of person I think Rachel really would have locked in with or really clicked with in previous seasons. I really like that. I like how she's able to get some info out of people like Riley. I just think for like she's really struggling with the quote unquote, I think the sense of like appreciation that comes from people revealing deep info. I think one of the things, because I read a tweet that basically Rachel had been asking Corey in America a lot about Cerie's gameplay on BB25, because she was, obviously it makes sense in retrospect, she was trying to figure out being like the vet among a group of newbies, like which she knew she was going into, her trying to figure out like what are the things that made Cerie really shine. And I think you can see her trying to emulate some of those. And I think in some ways it's working, in some ways I think it's not. I think Rachel is definitely is more like a normal house guest in terms of her level of power compared to some other people. But then she still is her old Rachel self at times, where she's great at getting the fights, struggles to get out of fights, and is very iconic. You saw this example play out with the Zay fight, which I'll get to in a second, but you also saw it with the Jimmy versus Rachel fight, which was more of a tiff, jokingly, in which Jimmy made fun of Rachel's outfit, and they had like a spat, in which they were fake fighting, but they were fighting. It just was in a like manner where they knew it was like there was no stakes to this, so they're just enjoying each other's like fighting with each other, and Rachel would just lose. There was a great line where Jim was like, "I love how you have a buffering sign over your head." And what makes this very funny to me is you have Jimmy's sort of speech against Keanu, which of course he of course went to Rachel and was like, "Should I do this?" And Rachel was like, "Oh yes, do it." And then Jimmy came up with the lines and then like rehearsed them so much that they just felt rehearsed and panned. But but you saw that, which was really fun, the build up to, oh, Jimmy's going to do this thing. You saw Jimmy and Rachel's sort of, I think, relationship overall grow, and I really enjoyed that piece of it. I think there's a lot of other interesting intrigue. I think Zach is someone who I'm watching out for. I think he's actually he's not like, he's decently entertaining. I'm genuinely baffled a bit that people really aren't looking at him in any capacity. It does help that he's safe this week. You can't nominate him this week, so I think a lot of people have kind of put him off the radar, in the same way that you can't nominate Vince this week because he's the HOH, and people aren't really thinking about talking about targeting next week, even though they really should. And honestly, it probably wouldn't even be too hard to target him, because especially if Kelly goes home, because, well, his number one ally is out, and there's not a lot of people who are going to be like, oh, I need retribution for Vince, who has kind of been a mess of a player. But overall, I would say the episode was, or the live feeds have been really good. Another favorite moment of mine is just like getting to see Ashley play. I remember being really scared and worried for her at the beginning when she was on the block. I know Hannah and Ashley grew up in preschool together. They've been friends for a long time. Recently, they were both at Georgetown at the same time together for various versions of post college school, med school, law school. It's very funny watching. I'm glad Ashley was safe this week, won the comp, and was able to do stuff there. And it's funny to me watch with that, because Ashley and Hannah have a lot of mannerisms together, and there are times where I'm like, you can totally see Hannah saying that, like some of the same kinds of jokes that Hannah would make. You see a lot of the same mannerisms, some of the same facial expressions, some of the same speech patterns in a way it's very alarming, and they look different, but there are enough similarities that's kind of surreal. And I don't think house guests would ever be like, oh, you're Hannah's blank, especially because none of these are live feeders, and none of them would have watched Hannah on feeds. But it is just jarring watching it in a way that I really enjoy and appreciate. It's a different version of Hannah, a little messier, a little less strategic, but I think Ashley's actually a very capable game player. In my way too early power rankings, which I've definitely put her too high at number one, but I do actually think that she's been a solid player. Um, I would love to see more from people like Mickey and Morgan, who I think have been kind of quiet on feeds. They've been very like they've been a little more passive. Morgan's been a little bit more busy, but they're not like these center pieces of the story right now, which is honestly fine. But I would like to see a bit more from them. I think players like Will have been really interesting. I think Ava's been a joy on live feeds. In a way, I was really caught me off guard. It's interesting because I remember seeing her initially and being like, it's this like ditzy like hippie archetype that they love. And then you listen to her in confessionals and you're like, oh, there's something more here that I find interesting. And then you listen to her more and you're like, oh, I actually think Ava's really interesting. And now I'm watching the live feeds. And no, Ava's really interesting. She's not the kind of player you would ever expect, but in a way that I find really endearing. And if I was playing the house, would love to work with, because I think she is able to play the game. She has a great personality. It's really entertaining. It has an edge to it in a way it's really fun, but also sweetness. It's really nice. And I just really like what Ava's doing. Riley is just a Riley and Catherine have been a choice. I don't understand the. Okay, let me phrase it. Riley did not grow up in an environment that was conducive to his long term success. That is something that's pretty apparent from everything he talks about, where he grew up, how he grew up. He had tobacco in ninth. I think if I recall, he said he did tobacco in ninth grade. There are like certain things where it's like obviously he's not been grown up in an environment that's like healthy for him to succeed and evolve. I think he said he never passed. He either made it to Algebra 1 and never got past it, or passed out, or like never passed Algebra 1. So either Algebra 1 finished and then stopped, or before Algebra 1, which is necessarily like, I don't think math means someone's intelligent or not, but it is a sign of the kind of environment that he grew up in, that he was not given the resources and tools to be able to succeed in that kind of area. I think where my main problem with Riley comes is his like, you need to just accept that I'm going to be hyper loyal to you because I really like you and I don't really care about winning the game. I just want you to win the game and I really want you to fall in love with me. That's a bit strange, especially given that there are rumors of some personal drama with like, it just, Riley feels a bit like a Cameron at this point. Less problematic, less extreme. Definitely not the Cameron's version where Cameron said, well, I just like Riley because she reminds me of my daughter. And it's strange because I like her, and there was clearly this like, you're like my daughter, and so I want to romantically be attached to you. That was really weird with Cameron. Shout out to Izzy for the all kind of line, and you know what? I don't care. But anyway, the point is, Riley's been a bit weird. But overall, I'm actually really happy with this cast. I'm gonna end it sort of with the sort of talk about the strategic side of the week. I think anytime the target wins veto, it makes for a great week because of the period with the veto has to create a shift of dynamic and energy. I think Kelly's sort of flopping has not exactly been entertaining to watch in a way that can be really frustrating. At the same time, though, I do like Kelly as a TV character. How do I say it? I like Kelly in confessionals. I think she's a bit grating. She's a bit of a weird side to her that I think is interesting. Not obviously, there's a reason why a lot of people don't love Kelly. It seems like Kelly might be okay. I mean, it's really conducive on if Zay is on the blockbuster or not. But Kelly's sort of gameplay has been really painful to watch. Vince's gameplay has been really painful to watch. Keanu's gameplay has been very painful to watch, especially because I had a lot of hope for him. I will say another player that's really struck me is Adrian. Adrian has sort of this like low key laid back vibe. He's clearly like, he's nerdy. He's a big fan of the show, it seems, but he's not that like rabid gamer boy that like you would expect from like a Corey or a Quinn. Like he's like hardcore gamer focused. Adrian's definitely more of a low key chill guy who's trying to figure out some of his like footing on the house, but it's also more he's definitely a bit more broy. I guess Quinn was kind of broy in a weird way, but he's more like he like can really vibe with the bros. He sort of like puts on or is just this persona that's a bit more broy. Like I think he has a lot of potential to really pop at some point, but he's definitely very willing to just let things be in a way that I find really different than I expected, in a way that's actually really positive. I think one of the problems people had with Adrian going in was a lot of people were worried it was too much, and I think if anything, we're seeing that Adrian is perfectly solid and normal in a way that I think is really cool. I guess last but not least, we have to talk about the Zay Rachel fight. The whole reason I re-recorded this, which is very iconic. I think Zay definitely comes across as like the child who's like, "Oh, I'm so logical, bro. I've got all the mind, bro. Bro, like you don't even have the like logical skill that I do. Like you're just an irrational child, bro. Like I'm a good boy, right? I'm a good boy, right? My logic is good, right? Look, oh, I have an idea. I can own you, bro." That is like very, very baffling and kind of painful to watch, but it's also very entertaining. Where it's like you want to just punch and be like, "No, you are being such an immature child. You are not." Obviously, when I say punch him, it's like just punch. Like I would never like don't support violence, but it's like you are painful to watch because you have this like immature. I've never been criticized attitude that gets you into like a hyper defensive point. It's like he's like, "Oh, can we let's," he basically pressures Rachel into just going to a side conversation. And then he repeats the exact same things. And Rachel's like, "What are we even doing here?" And she says, "I'm bored." And then Zay is pissed that she says she's bored and is like, "Oh, you're leaving because all my facts are correct, bro. You had no argument against me." And obviously Rachel's actually great at fights, but also I think there's something about growing up and getting older that I'm learning in my like from when I'm like 18 to now, where it's like the older you get, the less you have just interest in dealing with immature random shit. Like people who are being dumb, you're just like, "Oh my god, you're being dumb." And you're like, "I don't feel like dealing with this drama. You're being dumb. Let's move on. This is not something that's worthwhile dealing with." Or to the extent it's worthwhile dealing with, like it's not to this level. You're overreacting. Like, sure, let's talk about this thing, but it's not a big deal. And the younger you are, the more the small things really matter. And the harder it is to brush off slights. And instead you get like kind of immature. And I think Zay is very much in that mentality. And I think on the other hand, Rachel's, of course, very iconic, but also I think she's struggling a bit. When the fight ends, she's saying like, "I feel like I'm playing too much my old self, and it's like frustrating me a bit." And I think there's something really interesting about that kind of character that Rachel's putting on, this like attempt to be more mature that we were talking about earlier. And you see that in contrasted with the fight with Zay, in which of course Rachel has some great lines and some painful lines, like, "Oh, if you want to come for me again, like wait till I'm in a ball gown." Or "Wait till I'm in a gown." Where it's like, okay, Rachel, that was not exactly an ending line that was like, "Oh shit," you know? But I loved it. But of course, there's some great iconic lines. If you're gonna come for the queen, you're gonna get beheaded. There's some others. The gown one was fun. I just loved "I'm bored." But I would say overall, like I think it was very fun. I think it's a great reminder of what feeds can do. You watch this thing build up, and then you start seeing some reports on Twitter. It's like, "I'm about to play Donkey Kong," and there's like something where you're like, "Okay, I've got to look at this though." And as you're looking through this, you're like, "Oh, okay, let me jump on the feeds." And then you're watching this thing escalate and get to the point where there's fighting, and it's very entertaining. And then they go to the sword room, and it's like, "Oh yeah, this is what good feeds can be." And so for that, I have to give the feeds for the week a 9. Initially, I'd given them an 8. I had dropped them down a bunch because of the lack of feeds at the beginning, the fact that Vince was painful to watch, Keanu was painful to watch. But I think overall I have to give it a substantive boost because of the fight. And this is not a house that gets along super, super well. There's obviously people who get along. There's people who just don't want to fight at all. Catherine's been kind of just a quiet, would go with the flow person. Lauren's been very quiet in a way that's kind of boring to watch. But overall, I would say like this cast has been delivering in terms of a week one. I think Rachel does so much to change the vibe and dynamic of this house. I think someone like Zay, who's most likely to go home right now if he doesn't win, his like him deciding like I need to commit hard to Rachel as a target creates really entertaining strategy. Because like Obviously, it's a bit too late. If he had done it the day before, he has more time to say, here's why you need to worry about Rachel. But I also think Zay doesn't know the facts he needs to be really worried about, to convince people that Rachel really does need some people going after her. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, Rachel's not that much of a threat right now, and we can look at her later after we deal with some other people like Keanu. But overall, I really enjoyed this episode. Feeds 9, episodes 8. Comps, I think, 3 great comps, 1 just trash, horrible comps. I'll give them a 7. I don't think the other comps were good enough to justify anything higher than 7. In terms of the direction of the season, I would say we're currently sitting at about an 8. The boys, this is a very unique dynamic with the truly boys versus girls vibe that I just haven't really seen before. There's not this level of difference between the two groups. You've obviously had sort of like sectional wars, kings versus aces in 23. You've had split house scenarios like Bye Bye Bitches versus Family Style. But this is a different vibe altogether. This more generally like open animosity between these two sides. The girls really don't like Keanu and Zay. The guys sort of side don't vibe much with like Rachel and Kelly, but there's a lot of like potential here to build up to something because you see this like real fracture. And I'm struggling to figure out exactly what caused this fracture, given the HOH was played on day 1, from my understanding. Because normally fractures are most likely to occur when the HOH is not set till day 2, which means you create these sort of local maxima characters who pull these groups in, and then when the HOH is decided, wherever they fall, it sort of creates an inevitable two sides, because one side is closer to power than the other group. Even though there's not real sides yet, there's sort of like these local connections. But in this case, there's not really that, which creates an interesting question of like what's going on here. I think some of it is Rachel's really gravitated towards the girls. And also some of the guys have been a bit painful to watch. Riley, Zay. Actually, honestly, I kind of enjoy Zay, although I know he's been a lot. Praise Team Z article with the use of the R slur, which was really not good. Although I try to give people room to grow, especially when they're realized right away and apologize. But either way, overall, I really enjoyed this episode. Or this week. I'm really positive on the direction of the season. I would say the direction of the season, yeah, I think I said an 8. I think there's a lot of room for fights. I think, assuming Rachel is in it for a bit longer, I think you're going to see a lot more of that kind of thing. Not because like Rachel isn't seeking that thing, but people tend to get a bit more, I think, bombastic towards Rachel. I don't know. It's like they almost feel like they have an option to go after her, and she's willing to say like, no, I'm going to stand my ground, which I think creates the fight. Where I think a lot of people, it's like you don't feel this desire to go after her, but then she also doesn't have this desire to like stand her ground. She's like, okay, whatever, I'm just moving on. And so I think it creates this vibe that is like more tense. You have someone like Jimmy, who I think if he ever has like a real fight with Rachel, will be very iconic in the full Reagan 2.0 Rachel thing. I don't think this is like an all-time fight by any means between Jay and Rachel, but it's a great reminder of what feeds can be. And very enjoyable. There's a great, to end it off, there's one of my favorite gifs, I think, of BB ever. There's been some iconic BB gifs that have made it well past the BB mainstream. There's one where Rachel's hugging Keanu, and she rolls her eyes so hard, and then gives the fakest smile afterwards. That is just iconic, like an all-time BB gif I just loved. But overall, I'm really happy with the season so far. I hope you are too. We'll see what happens to the Blockbuster night. It'll be fun. Obviously, my stance on the blockbuster's effect on this period of the game is still kind of true from yesterday's episode. But with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Take care. Bye.